The finale of The Prisoner of Azkaban has always been chaotic. Lupin's transformation, Sirius on the run, and Harry facing the Dementors. And in my opinion, whilst I really love the movie, I do think that it could have done a little bit more with the wide range of emotions during these moments. From Harry and Hermione's fear, to Snape's fury, and Hagrid's despair, followed by joy. In this episode, I aim to fix that. We'll be exploring everything from the chaos at the lake, to Harry's first Patronus, and the daring escape of Sirius and Buckbeak. Plus all of the quiet and tense moments that show just how high the stakes really are. And yes, we will also close the season with a little teaser as to what is to come in Season 4. So without further ado, let's jump into my vision for the finale of Harry Potter Season 3, Episode 8, Hermione's Secret. The episode opens in the middle of Lupin's horrifying transformation, and with the older age rating of TV-14 that I've mentioned before, I do really want this to be pretty shocking. Lupin's change should also be incredibly raw and painful, which really just highlights how big a burden this is on him and how much he's been hiding from everybody all year. As he eventually completes his transformation, the manacle binding Ron and Pettigrew to him snaps. Sirius reacts immediately and transforms into Padfoot, and I really want the speed to be highlighted here as it shows the experience that Sirius has at dealing with Lupin's condition. He doesn't hesitate or consider the risk to himself, he just goes straight in, showing again just how deep their friendship really is. And the fight between Lupin and Sirius needs to be very messy and uneven, as really I want the audience to see just how tragic this situation is, with these two best friends being forced into this fight. And the lack of clean movement really supports the idea that this really is a disaster, not just an action scene. While the fight absorbs everybody, Pettigrew seizes his chance, grabs the wand off the floor, pushes Ron and Crookshanks aside, and vanishes. Once Pettigrew escapes, Sirius and Lupin sprint off towards the forest and the lake, leaving the scene to breathe for a couple of seconds. The sound mix drops into a ringing silence, and we see Snape levitating in the air, Ron is down, and the trio look helplessly at the space around them. A distant yelping is the cue that breaks the silence, and the camera tracks Harry as he sprints off towards the lake with Hermione in tow. As they reach the lake shore, the cold hits with a visual cue. The lighting goes into a kind of cold blue, and the breath becomes visible in the air. The Dementors appear as a slow, silent wave, first being blurred in the background before they start filling up the frame, suggesting that everything is closing in. Harry then tries to conjure a Patronus, but we see that these attempts are incredibly frail and desperate, and this is going to massively contrast what we see later in the episode. And I want the editing done in a certain way that really highlights this, so when he's performing the Patronus, the wand light flickers, making his face look younger and more vulnerable. With each attempt, the music thins out, and the screaming in Harry's head starts to fade in, including the rattling sound of the Dementor's breath. When Hermione collapses, I want the camera to dip as well, making Harry look completely isolated at this point, surrounded by this crowd of hooded figures. And then we see one Dementor approaching Harry, lowering his hood as the camera pushes in. Then, across the lake, a burst of bright white light illuminates everything, and I really want the Patronus to be completely shifting the environment. Harry can't quite tell what it is, but he can make out that it's some form of animal running across the lake, captured in a long, wide shot. The Dementors scatter, and we see Harry watching the animal running back to a figure across the shore, and when it holds up a hand, we linger on this shot for a beat, allowing the audience to try and question what it is they're seeing. Harry collapses, the sound dampens, and the sequence ends with a slow pullback shot of Harry, Hermione, and Sirius lying unconscious on the lake edge. We cut to black, and the title sequence rolls. Before we properly jump into the finale, please remember to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, like the video, and hit the notification bell if you want to see more news, theories, rumours about the new HBO Harry Potter show, along with many other things about the Harry Potter world. After the title sequence, we open with Harry slowly regaining consciousness. He squints as he notices that everything's slightly blurred, and when he looks around, he sees Madame Pomfrey at the end of the ward tending to Ron, and when he looks to his other side, he sees Hermione lying there looking at him with a finger to her lips. The faint murmurs from Fudge and Snape filter in from the corridor, with Fudge thanking Snape for everything he did, and Snape informing him about everything that happened, although literally all of it is wrong. Harry's eyes widen as he tries to focus, but at that point, Madame Pomfrey approaches him carrying a massive mountain of chocolate, breaks off a bit, and shoves it in Harry's mouth. Even in these tense moments, there is still room for the occasional comedic one. Harry insists that he needs to go and see Dumbledore, but at that moment, Fudge and Snape enter the room. Harry and Hermione try to explain, shouting over each other, and it's deliberately chaotic as the tension just builds. The camera lingers on Harry and Hermione's shocked faces as Dumbledore speaks to Snape and Fudge and asks them to leave the room, leaving him alone with them. His tone is quiet and precise as he explains that Sirius is now imprisoned in Flitwick's classroom and that time is their only ally, as he has a fairly cryptic conversation with Hermione.
Miss Granger, you know the law. You know what is at stake. You must not be seen.
Before he leaves the room, Hermione then produces the time turner and the tiny hourglass catches glints of light as she explains what it is. The camera lingers on Harry's bewildered face whilst the hourglass is turned 3 times. The world twists, dissolving into a blur of colour and movement, and it is similar to the standard time travel trope. However, this time I want to see it more grounded from Harry's point of view. Sound here is also crucial as we hear a kind of layered whooshing sound and a ticking that gets more and more intense as the hourglass rotates. When they emerge into the deserted entrance hall, Harry and Hermione head into a broom cupboard, and this is when Hermione explains what the time turner is. And as she does so, we'll see flashes from earlier in the season, which really connects the dots around Hermione's strange behaviour. They go on to plan their next moves with precise attention to sightlines, Hagrid's hut, and the Whomping Willow. We follow them as they navigate past the greenhouses to the forest edge, and we'll alternate the camera shots between their anxious faces and Buckbeak tethered to a post. And the next few scenes will actually be very similar to what we got in the movie. The committee arrives and we hear Fudge reading the execution decree as the camera tightens on Buckbeak's eyes. We then watch Harry and Hermione move silently towards Buckbeak, pulling his rope and encouraging him to move forward, and just like in the movie, it will be incredibly tense. And when Buckbeak moves towards the forest, there's definitely a sense of relief, but the danger isn't over. Then, like in the movie, the Whomping Willow sequence is shown from Harry and Hermione's perspective, including Snape and Lupin's arrival. We also get the moment where Harry wants to go and collect the cloak before Snape arrives, but Hermione stops him just in time before we see Hagrid making his way up to the castle, drunk and singing. Hermione says,
"See what would have happened? We've got to keep out of sight."
Again, like in the movie, Harry and Hermione have a conversation about who produced the Patronus, with Harry saying that he thinks it was his dad, and then we see the party emerge from the Whomping Willow. The first big change that we'll have seen for a while is when Harry and Hermione run away from the forest with Buckbeak, as they realise Lupin will head towards them, and instead they head to Hagrid's hut. In the hut, Harry's attention shifts to what's going to happen at the lake, and after he says,
"I'm not going to try and interfere, but if we don't see what's going on, how are we going to know when it's time to rescue Sirius?"
he heads to the lake to observe what is happening. He watches the Dementors surrounding Harry, Hermione and Sirius, and he sees his own Patronus flickering in the distance. Then Harry understands. He bursts forward and produces his own fully fledged Patronus. Unlike in the movie, the stag bursts fully into view, driving the Dementors back. The camera follows it, galloping across the lake, glinting in the moonlight, before it returns to Harry, bows, and vanishes. As I mentioned in the previous episode, the movie completely left out the Marauder's backstory, and that left this Patronus scene lacking a little bit for me in this movie. We didn't get a proper look at the stag, and when we did catch a glimpse of it, it just didn't really make sense in the context of the film. The sequence ends with Harry standing in shock about what he just did. We cut to black to end sequence 2. Sequence 3 begins with Harry still standing by the lake with his arm outstretched as the Patronus glow fades, and then suddenly there's a burst of movement as Hermione appears, pulling Buckbeak into frame. And as Harry explains what he's just done, I really want the camera to focus on Hermione's expressions here, as her reaction would sell the insanity of what just happened far more than Harry's explanation. We then shift to Snape arriving at the lake's edge, and in a wide shot we'll see him conjure up the stretchers that rise into frame. Hermione then checks her watch, which allows us to pick up this clock-ticking theme again. Hermione says,
"We've got about 45 minutes until Dumbledore locks the door to the hospital wing. We've got to rescue Sirius and get back into the ward before anybody realises we're missing."
Before we see McNair, the executioner, crossing the grounds, and under the moonlight we'll catch a glimpse of his axe, which really highlights what is still to come without it being too obvious. From there we move into the Buckbeak and Sirius escape sequence, and just like in the movie, it will be incredibly cinematic. Harry climbs up first before Hermione clambers on terrified, and Buckbeak ascends into the air. It gives us one of the few chances in this finale to really take a breath as we see grand wide shots of the hippogriffs soaring over the grounds and the castle. Eventually they arrive at the window where Sirius is being kept, and once he clambers out onto Buckbeak, they fly off as the pace picks up again to the West Tower. As they arrive, Harry and Hermione slide off and urge Sirius to go. And this final exchange between them will be pretty small. The moment in the movie where Harry and Sirius share a conversation is absolutely iconic and could be some of the best acting in the entire series, and I really don't want the show to copy that or kind of take anything away from it. Here it will be much more similar to the book, with Sirius stammering his thanks whilst Harry and Hermione keep cutting him off, telling him to go, before Sirius says,
"We'll see each other again. You are, truly, your father's son, Harry."
And he soars off into the night. We then follow Harry and Hermione as they rush towards the hospital wing, and I almost want this to feel like a bit of a heist sequence with loads of low angles, running around corners, flickering torches, as they try to make it back unseen. On their way, they overhear Fudge and Snape, and we see Harry tensing up as they hear Snape's arrogance and Fudge's self-satisfaction. They also have to avoid Peeves, which will just add to the chaotic Hogwarts energy, but I would cut it quickly, almost like a jump scare interruption. It's just enough to add variety to the escape. By the time Harry and Hermione reach the corridor leading towards the hospital wing, the tension is completely peaking as Hermione keeps checking her watch, keeping the pressure on the viewer. Then Dumbledore appears outside the door, and this acts like a tonal release, slowing everything down and lifting the weight of the pressure. Dumbledore lets them inside, and after a few moments of silence, chaos erupts as Snape and Fudge burst into the hospital wing. Snape shouts accusations and Fudge spirals whilst Dumbledore dismantles everything, and I would like the camera to be very locked off here, almost completely contrasting Snape's energy. The more unhinged he gets, the calmer the frame becomes, allowing him to really unravel whilst not becoming too chaotic. The moment reaches its climax as Dumbledore asks Madame Pomfrey if Harry and Hermione ever left their beds, at which she says,
"Of course not. I've been with them ever since you left."
Leading to Snape storming out with Dumbledore and Fudge close behind. And then Ron comes around in bed, and it gives us that final little character moment that we need. He's confused and panicking as he's trying to work out what's happened, and I especially love the moment with Harry handing it off to Hermione saying,
"You explain."
because it's such a Harry way to end such a chaotic night. We cut to black to end Sequence 3. Sequence 4 is one that ties everything else from this season in a really nice way, much more fitting to the story, as opposed to that freeze frame. The sequence opens with Harry going to find Professor Lupin in his office, and on his way the corridors are completely quiet and empty, and the only sound is the echo of Harry's footsteps. Like in the movie, Lupin is already packing, and I'd like to keep the camera handheld at this moment to keep this all incredibly grounded and human. Harry stands by the desk as Lupin folds away the last of his things, and he goes on to explain that he's resigned as Snape let slip his condition at breakfast. When Dumbledore arrives at the doorway, Lupin leaves with a brief word to the pair of them, and Dumbledore steps inside for a conversation with Harry that was left out of the movie. They talk about what happened at the lake and Professor Trelawney's prediction, at which Dumbledore says,
"Who'd have thought it? That brings her total of real predictions up to 2. I should offer her a pay rise."
They also discuss Pettigrew and his escape, which allows the audience to understand the long-term consequences of everything that happened, especially with Pettigrew now being indebted to Harry, as this will be so crucial in the future. Then the conversation moves on to James, and we get the confirmation that Harry's patronus is a stag due to his father, as Dumbledore says,
"So you did see your father last night, Harry? You found him inside yourself."
And with that final emotional beat, we transition into the final sequence, which is the train journey. Hermione reveals she's dropped Muggle studies, and then the conversation shifts to the Quidditch World Cup, setting up next season. Then Sirius's letter arrives with a tiny owl. Obviously he's not named at this point, but it is going to be nice to finally see Pigwidgeon. Harry opens the letter and reads that Sirius and Buckbeak are now in hiding. He also reads,
"It was I who sent you the firebolt,"
which is a really nice way to tie up one of the ongoing mysteries of this season. He then goes on to pull out the Hogsmeade permission slip from Sirius, and the camera pushes in on Harry's face, underlining this incredibly emotional moment. The episode winds down as we follow Harry off the train and into King's Cross Station, where we see the Dursleys standing awkwardly in the middle of all the chaos. When Uncle Vernon asks Harry about the letter he's holding, Harry says,
"It's a letter from my godfather. He was my mum and dad's best friend. He's a convicted murderer, but he's broken out of wizard prison, and he's on the run,"
leaving Uncle Vernon stunned. And the last beat works if we hold on Harry's expression for a moment. He's not smug or triumphant, he's just satisfied. We cut to black to end the episode. But as always, we need to end the season on a teaser for season 4. A dark forest fades in and a title card appears saying Albania. We cut to a moonlit forest floor. A single rat zooms through the undergrowth as we see other rats appearing and squeaking at it before disappearing. The forest grows darker and darker as he pushes deeper, and the sound starts to fade out, replaced by a low hissing sound. The rat slips into a hollow beneath a twisted tree, and we linger on total blackness for a moment. Then we hear a thin whisper say, "Wormtail," and the credits roll. This episode works because it really tries to balance the more intense moments and more grounded character ones. Lupin's transformation and the fight with Sirius is emotional storytelling, which really highlights how deep their friendship is. The Patronus sequence builds tension and triumph, really highlighting Harry's growth. And the hospital wing, the time turner, and Sirius's escape really tried to balance humour, darkness, and human connection. So what do you think? Was this finale a good one, or were there moments that you would change? Once again, let me know in the comments. And before I finish, I just want to say thank you so much for watching my vision for season 3. I've really enjoyed making this one, as it is my favourite movie and one of my favourite books. However, I did want to give an update regarding the My Vision series, as they do take an incredibly long time for me to write, film, edit, and put out, and it's something I've been struggling with for a while around balancing it with my work life and my personal life. So I am going to be taking a bit of a short break from the My Vision series. I will still be putting out content every single week around the HBO show and also the audiobooks and anything else that might come up in between. But yeah, regarding my vision, it will be a while before we see the next season. That's not to say it won't happen though, it will definitely come out, but not for a few weeks at least. Once again though, remember to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, like the video, and hit the notification bell, as I said, there will still be tons more Harry Potter news, theories, and breakdowns coming out very soon.